I almost forgave my wife for leaving with my brother. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I thought what they did was acceptable. I almost forgave them because my father stood in my kitchen 3 weeks after they left, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "Son, sometimes keeping a family together means being the bigger person." At the time, I thought he was asking me to accept something painful. I didn't realize he was asking me to accept something he already knew. My name is Daniel, and I'm 37. Until that summer, I thought I had a fairly ordinary life. I worked as an operations manager for a regional construction supplier in Ohio. I wasn't rich, but I paid my bills, owned a modest house, kept money in savings, and had never missed a mortgage payment. My wife, Claire, and I had been married for 9 years. My younger brother, Ryan, was 34. And if you asked my parents which one of us had made them proud, they never had to think very long. It was Ryan. Ryan had always been the charming one. He could walk into a room 5 minutes late and somehow make everyone happy to see him. He changed jobs frequently, started businesses that didn't last, borrowed money when things went wrong, and somehow convinced my parents that every setback was somebody else's fault. I was the opposite. If I had a problem, I solved it. If I needed something, I saved for it. If I made a mistake, I admitted it. My father called that being too serious. My mother called it having no ambition. Ryan could buy an expensive watch on credit, and my parents would talk about his entrepreneurial spirit. I replaced the brakes on my car myself, and my dad would say, "Daniel, you spend too much time worrying about little things." I had gotten used to it. What I hadn't gotten used to was Claire changing. It started gradually. She became protective of her phone. She started coming home later. If I asked how her day went, she would say, "Fine," and disappear into the bedroom. I didn't immediately suspect an affair. Honestly, I didn't want to be that husband. I trusted her. I also trusted my brother. That was probably my biggest mistake. Ryan had been around our house constantly that year. He said he was helping Claire with a small online business she wanted to start. I thought it was harmless. Claire wasn't particularly interested in the financial side of things, and Ryan claimed he knew how to market products online. One evening, I came home early and found the two of them sitting at my dining table. They stopped talking when I walked in. Ryan smiled. "Hey man." Claire looked uncomfortable. I remember setting my keys down and asking, "Everything okay?" "Of course," Claire said. Ryan laughed. "Why wouldn't it be?" I looked at them for another second. Then I said, "Okay," and I walked upstairs. I wish I could say I knew something was wrong. I didn't. A month later, Claire told me she needed space. She said she wasn't happy. I asked if there was someone else. She looked at the floor. That was my answer. "Is it Ryan?" I asked. She started crying. That hurt more than if she'd simply admitted it. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain. She just said, "I'm sorry." I remember sitting across from her at our kitchen table, staring at the woman I'd shared 9 years of my life with. "You're leaving me for my brother?" I didn't plan for this to happen. That doesn't really answer the question. She wiped her face. "I don't know what else to say. You could tell me the truth." She couldn't. Or wouldn't. The next morning, she packed 2 suitcases. Ryan picked her up. I watched them leave from the front window. My brother didn't even look at me. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. Not broken. Quiet. I didn't call them. I didn't threaten Ryan. I didn't send angry messages to Claire. I simply went to work. I kept paying the bills. I hired an attorney. I started the divorce process. And then my father showed up. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what had happened. He poured himself coffee and said, "Your mother and I think you need to forgive them." I stared at him. "Forgive them?" "Yes." "Dad, she left me for Ryan." "I know. And you're asking me to forgive them? They're still family." I laughed once because I honestly didn't know what else to do. "I'm your son too." His expression tightened. "Don't make this about choosing sides." "I'm not. You need to stop being angry." "I am not angry." That seemed to surprise him. I wasn't. I was hurt. There was a difference. My father leaned against the counter. "Ryan is struggling. Claire is confused. If you shut them out, you'll regret it." I looked at him. "Do you know something I don't?" He paused, just for a second. Then he said, "No." I believed him. That was my second mistake. For the next several weeks, my parents pressured me constantly. My mother called and said Claire was going through a difficult time. My father said Ryan felt guilty. I told them I wasn't interested in punishing anyone. I just wanted distance. Then came the family dinner. My mother invited everyone to celebrate my grandfather's birthday. My grandfather, Harold, was 81. He had always been different from the rest of my family. He rarely talked about money. He didn't care about job titles. He didn't ask what kind of car I drove. He asked questions. He remembered answers. When I was 24 and struggling to find steady work, Grandpa Harold had sat with me on his back porch and said something I never forgot. Never confuse being overlooked with being worthless. I hadn't understood how important those words would become. At dinner, Ryan and Claire arrived together. I almost left. My mother stopped me. "Please, Daniel, just stay for your grandfather." So I did. Everyone acted awkward for about 20 minutes. Then Ryan started talking. He told everyone he and Claire were trying to build a future together. My mother smiled. My father nodded. I kept eating. Then Ryan said, "Honestly, I think this whole thing has been harder than it needed to be." I looked up. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Daniel, you know Claire and I didn't plan this." Claire stared at her plate. Ryan continued, "We all have to move forward eventually." My father looked at me. That look told me exactly what everyone expected. I put my fork down. "I'm not stopping anyone from moving forward." Ryan leaned back. "Then why are you still acting like we're enemies?" "I don't." My mother interrupted. "Can we please not do this tonight?" I nodded. "Fine." Then my grandfather spoke. "Actually, I would like to do this tonight." Everyone became quiet. Grandpa Harold looked at Ryan. "Did you tell your brother about the company?" Ryan frowned. "What company?" Grandpa looked at my father. My father's face changed. I noticed. So did everyone else. Grandpa turned back toward me. "Daniel, I think it's time you knew." My father stood up. "Dad, this isn't the right moment." Grandpa shook his head. "It's exactly the right moment." He reached into a leather folder beside his chair and removed several papers. I thought they were going to be estate documents. I was wrong. He handed them to me. The first page had my name on it. I looked at my father. "What is this?" He didn't answer. Grandpa said, 3 years ago, I asked Daniel to help me review the operations of my old distribution company. I knew my grandfather had owned a small industrial supply business before retiring. I didn't know he still owned anything." He continued. "Daniel found several problems in the company's logistics system. He spent 6 months fixing them. I remembered that. Grandpa had asked me for help. I assumed it was just a favor. Apparently, it wasn't. The company was losing money, Grandpa said. Daniel helped stabilize it. I offered him a small ownership interest. I stared at the document. It showed a minority ownership stake. But there was more. Grandpa had created a succession agreement. If he became unable to manage the business, operational control would transfer to me. I looked at my father. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked uncomfortable. "Because Grandpa wanted it kept private." Grandpa nodded. "I didn't want the family treating you differently because of money." I felt my stomach tighten. Then Ryan laughed. "So Daniel gets the company?" Grandpa looked at him. "No." Ryan's smile returned. "Good." Grandpa continued. "Daniel gets control of the company if certain conditions are met. One of those conditions is that he remains financially responsible and doesn't use the company for personal disputes." Ryan's smile disappeared. Grandpa turned toward him. "You don't get anything." Silence. My mother looked shocked. My father looked angry. Then Ryan said, "That's unbelievable." Grandpa calmly replied, "You were never offered ownership." Ryan looked at my father. "You knew about this?" My father didn't answer. Ryan stood up. "So everyone knew except me?" "No," Grandpa said. "Everyone knew except Daniel." I stared at the papers. Suddenly, my father's strange behavior made sense. The pressure to forgive. The urgency. The insistence that I keep the family together. He wasn't simply worried about my marriage. He was worried about something else. I looked at him. "Dad." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Did you know about Claire and Ryan before she left?" His face went pale. My mother looked at him. "Robert." My father finally sat down. I knew they were spending time together. That wasn't my question. He rubbed his forehead. I suspected. When? He stayed silent. Grandpa answered for him. Before Daniel did. The room went completely still. I felt something I hadn't expected. Not rage. Disappointment. I had spent weeks wondering whether I had failed to notice something. But my father had known. He had watched it happen. And instead of warning me, he'd told me to forgive. I stood up. Why? My father finally looked at me. Because I thought if you forgave them, we could keep the family together. You knew they were together. I wasn't certain. You knew enough to suspect. Yes. And you still told me to forgive them. He looked down. I didn't know what else to do. I nodded slowly. That answer hurt more than an excuse would have. Because it was honest. My father hadn't betrayed me because he hated me. He had betrayed me because, once again, he thought protecting Ryan was more important than protecting me. I put the papers back on the table. I don't want Ryan's punishment. Ryan scoffed. I don't need anything from you. I looked at him. Good. Then I turned toward Grandpa. I appreciate what you're offering, but I don't want the company because everyone else failed me. Grandpa smiled faintly. That's precisely why I offered it to you. My father looked up. What does that mean? Grandpa answered. It means Daniel has spent his entire life proving he can be trusted without needing anyone's approval. No one spoke. Then Grandpa said something that stayed with me. Money didn't make him responsible. Responsibility is why I trusted him with money. The dinner ended shortly afterward. Ryan left. Claire followed him. My mother stayed behind. She came into the kitchen while I was putting dishes in the sink. I didn't know, she whispered. I know. She started crying. I should have treated you differently. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only honest thing. I wish you had. She nodded. Then she left. My father didn't come after me. For the first time in my life, I think he understood that there was nothing he could say that would immediately fix what he'd done. The divorce was finalized several months later. Claire and Ryan stayed together for a while. Eventually, they broke up. I heard about it from my mother, not from either of them. Apparently, once the excitement disappeared, they discovered that running away together didn't solve the problems they had created. Ryan struggled financially. Claire moved to another city. Neither asked me for help. I didn't ask them for anything either. As for my grandfather's company, I accepted the responsibility, but not because I wanted to prove something to my family. I took the job seriously. I spent the first year learning every part of the business. I hired people who knew more than I did. I asked questions. I made mistakes. I fixed them. The company eventually grew. Not dramatically. Not overnight. Just steadily. Exactly the way I had built everything else in my life. A year after the divorce, my father called me. I almost didn't answer. But I did. He sounded different. Tired. Daniel. Yeah. I owe you an apology. I leaned back in my chair. For what? For thinking you needed to be the one who fixed everything. I didn't respond. He continued. I spent your whole life thinking Ryan needed more help than you did. I looked out the office window. That wasn't your fault. It was. There was a long silence. Then he said, I called you selfish when you were independent. I called you cold when you were setting boundaries. I praised Ryan for things I expected from you without ever saying thank you. I swallowed. That was probably the first time my father had ever said something like that. I can't change the past, I said. No. He paused. But I'd like to change what comes next. I didn't promise him anything. I didn't tell him everything was forgiven. I simply said, then start there. He did. Slowly. He stopped comparing us. He stopped making excuses for Ryan. He started asking about my life instead of telling me how to live it. It took time. There were still uncomfortable conversations. There were still moments when old habits returned. But eventually, our relationship became something new. Not perfect, just honest. A few months later, Grandpa Harold passed away peacefully. At his funeral, my father stood beside me. After everyone had left, we sat together outside the church. My father looked at me. Your grandfather was always proud of you. I smiled. I know. He told me something once. What? He said. Daniel never needed us to tell him who he was. I looked down at my hands. For years, I had thought my biggest wound was losing my wife. It wasn't. The deeper wound had been spending my entire life believing that if I worked hard enough, stayed calm enough, and proved myself enough, eventually my family would finally see me. But I had it backward. I didn't need them to see me. I needed to see myself clearly. I wasn't the forgotten son. I wasn't the less successful brother. I wasn't the husband who had been replaced. I was simply a man who had been given a painful choice: become bitter or become better. I chose better. And when my father called that night, I finally understood what he had been trying to say all along. Forgiveness wasn't pretending they hadn't hurt me. It wasn't inviting them back into my life without boundaries. And it certainly wasn't giving up my dignity to keep everyone comfortable. Forgiveness, for me, was letting go of the need for the people who underestimated me to finally admit they were wrong. They had already shown me who they were. My job was to decide who I would become. And for the first time in my life, that decision belonged entirely to me.